Welcome to the Strategic Marketer Podcast, where we talk about strategies, tactics, and practical steps to help you become a more strategic marketer. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today I'm speaking with Dan Sanchez, the Director of Audience Growth at Sweetfish Media and the co-host of the B2B Growth Podcast. In today's conversation, we discuss thought leadership, what it is, what it isn't, and how you can gain influence by growing in expertise and sharing your ideas. Let's jump right in. Dan, I've seen you post on LinkedIn about thought leadership. And so I just kind of wanted, first of all, your opinion on thought leadership and the term thought leadership and how it's used.
Thought leadership is often kind of a cringy term that people like to knock all the time. I'm amazed at how often I see people bashing the term thought leader, thought leadership. It's just a buzzword. It's just a fad. It's going to go away. It's cringy. People should never use it. It's not even a thing. But I find over and over again that it is a thing. It is a good term, as cringy as it can be because people misapply it all the time. It is a real thing. It is a real strategic marketing approach that has it really can serve as a great basis for a lot of other marketing approaches, from demand gen to account-based marketing to branding. In a B2B context, thought leadership is a huge play. Like being perceived as the leader in a specific way of thinking, which is what thought leadership is the underpinning of many great marketing strategies. So I think people are discounting it because of how many fakers there are out there, how many charlatans are out there masquerading as quote unquote thought leaders. But it is a real thing. It is a real term. And while there's a lot of people misapplying it, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not real or doesn't work.
So what does real thought leadership look like then? What would be a good example?
So I like to think about it as terms. It's actually easier to think about it in terms of like who's a real thought leader as in a person. And I think a real thought leader has three elements to become like a real one, an authentic one, instead of one of the fakers. Real thought leaders have a deep level of expertise, like they actually know really well what they're talking to or what they're presenting. So that's one aspect. They have a deep level of expertise. The second one is they have original and useful ideas. And it has to be both those things. It has to be an original idea. It can't be ripping it off from someone else. And it has to actually be useful. Yeah. Because just because it's original doesn't really make it good. Maybe it's an art of some kind, but maybe, I don't know, it's no one's going to care, right? It actually has to be useful to the niche expertise or niche industry that you're in. And then you have to have what I call authority, but I'm actually playing around with this name because I think authority is probably a little bit, I don't know, it's just not the right word. I'm still playing with it though. But essentially, like you have to become known. You have to be known by others. You have to be prolific in social media. You have to be all over the place. Otherwise, you'll just be an unknown thought leader. You won't be leading anybody. You'll have unique thoughts, and they might actually be credible, unique, and helpful thoughts. But if nobody is getting introduced to your thoughts, then what good is that?
Yeah, maybe
if you're off studying in a tower and you have amazing ideas, you cured cancer.
Right.
You legitimately cured cancer. But if no one knows about it, then what good is it if you actually have the cure to cancer?
Yeah.
And maybe you didn't cure cancer, but maybe you cured a cancer within your industry of thinking, right? A bad thing, a problem that everybody faces. But if nobody knows about it, no one's actually talking about it, working it, or putting it to use, then what good is it to have unique and original thoughts? You have to have them known. So you need those three things. You need the expertise, you need the unique and original ideas, and you need that sort of authority. Some people call it celebrity. It's just being known out in that space. And it doesn't have to be like famous, like Will Smith famous. You just have to be known in that little tiny niche. It might be you might probably not only need to be known by like 50 of the main players in the category or whatever, but
right.
It doesn't take a lot.
Yeah, I know my brother's in a sales job in the security industry, and they focus on a really small niche, but it's extremely profitable if they can make the sales. And there's one guy who's a thought leader in that space that literally everybody listens to. And I mean, there's really only a handful of people that have credibility. And out of all of those people, he's the guy that everyone listens to. And if he says something, everyone listens. And he's known by all the top people in the industry. But like you're saying, it's not this massive, he's not an A-list celebrity or something. You and I will have never heard of him before, but he certainly has thought
He's
leadership.
a celebrity to those people, to the people that matter. He is a celebrity. And if there's a conference in that industry, he's probably the top speaker every time, right?
Absolutely.
And not that thought leaders have to be speakers necessarily, but that's the power thought leadership has. You are the leader in a particular industry in a way of thinking that is helpful to others.
Absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, we can help people understand how to go from being a thought person to a thought leader. That's the difference. That's the transition you have to make if you have the good thoughts.
Right? Yeah.
So what are some good examples of thought leaders? I think we can, probably name some of the really big people, but maybe you could give an example of somebody that you really appreciate that is a bigger name person. And then maybe an example of somebody that is more of a niche thought leader.
Someone who's a niche thought leader. Oh, where'd that book go? Dang.
Yeah, I mean, I think some common thought leaders that come to mind that would be the famous ones would be like Seth Godin, Gary Vee,
oh yeah,
Simon Sinek. So, there's all of those people. But then who are some of the people in between that are a little bit more attainable for people like you and I to get to?
One of the ones that stood out to me recently is April Dunford around positioning, because she finally wrote the book about how to do it. Not just what marketing positioning is, not just case studies of where it's been done well, but how to actually figure it out for yourself. So April's name has been coming up more and more often. I read the book and I fell in love with it 2 months ago. And now I'm starting to see it, and I'm starting to notice her name in different sessions as a speaker here, or having written an article here. And I'm like, ooh, April wrote it? Oh, okay. She's quickly becoming like the thought leader for me when it comes to marketing positioning. Because the leaders who wrote the original book called Positioning, like decades and decades ago, like never really created a great playbook on how to do it. So she's pioneering the practitioner's guide to actually doing positioning rather than just trying and guessing.
I love that. Yeah, I'll have to check her out. I haven't seen anything about her. I feel like I've heard her name before, but I couldn't have told you what she was known for. So
her book is called Obviously Awesome. And I was looking for it. I was going to grab it on the video, but I realized it's out in my living room because I've actively been rereading it. I thought I had it just over here. But
yeah, I love positioning and thinking about positioning, and I've read a lot of the books on it. So that's exciting. glad to hear about somebody new. Okay, so then that's an example of somebody who's moving forward in thought leadership and gaining some credibility. What are some examples of? I don't want you to give specific people's names. That's not the point. But what are some examples of bad thought? Not bad thought leadership, but bad people who are trying to be thought leaders and maybe trying a little too hard and giving that cringe factor.
I always have one example that comes to mind. And it always happens with people that are like pitching themselves to speak on B2B growth, or the podcast that I co-host. One example always comes to mind is a guy who had a PhD in a field, and I forget what he wanted to talk about, but it's what he wrote his dissertation in, had written a book about it. And across his LinkedIn profile, he has like all these logos of places where he's been published. And then the pitch was just all about him. And I'm like, dude, like I've never heard of you. Your topic, it's not that exciting. It's kind of like, okay. It's kind of like a warning to like, do it this way or else something bad could happen. It was kind of like, maybe. Maybe you have some good cases there. But I don't know. He just came off as somebody who just was trying too hard. It just didn't work. And honestly, because he had the expertise, he had a PhD, he probably had some original and useful ideas, but he wasn't really well known. He didn't have the authority in this space. And probably because I hadn't seen him elsewhere. I hadn't seen him been published. I haven't seen him on social. No one's ever mentioned him. Haven't heard him in any podcast.
But then he's coming forward saying
he's kind of like an example of someone who's positioning themselves as a thought leader and they didn't necessarily call themselves a thought leader. It's like rule number 1, just don't call yourself a thought leader. If you call yourself a thought leader, it's like obvious, like, oh, you're probably not, because real thought leaders don't need to say it. They just are. But in his case, he was masquerading as one and wasn't quite there yet. You don't need to get there, and you don't need to be so strong in your logo, where I've been published presentation at the very top of what you've done in order to prove that you're a thought leader when you're not quite yet.
Yeah.
Build a little bit more relationship, help more people, get your name out there by just being really, really helpful, growing your owned media space first. Go help 1,000 people, one comment at a time on LinkedIn or Twitter or something. And your name will start getting out there, especially if your ideas actually are freaking helpful.
Yeah.
Like really helpful.
This week's episode of The Strategic Marketer is brought to you by the Brand Compass course. If you're looking to take your marketing services side hustle to the next level, the Brand Compass course is for you. In the course, you're going to learn how to identify your ideal customers and narrow down to serve a niche market. Then you're going to learn how to productize your offering so that it's easier for customers to understand exactly what you do for them. And then you're going to put all of this information into a one-page messaging guide. That way you can use your customer's language to speak exactly to their pain points and problems every single time. Check out the show notes for a link to the course. Yeah, and I think we're probably on the same page about the approach to marketing or sales, where if you're going in pitching about yourself and it's I, me, we all get pitches in our LinkedIn inboxes or regular inboxes all the time. And you're like, you didn't stop to think about me at all. You're trying to pitch me on whatever it is you want. And the focus is all on you. And so, it sounds like some of the negative things around thought leadership is when you're approaching thought leadership for the sake of you becoming a thought leader and you positioning yourself as a thought leader versus I want to help people. And I want to help people, get to the place that they want to be. And if I can help them achieve that, and I see those results, they see those results in their life from my thoughts and my ideas, then those people are going to come back and want more. And if you have those people following you for your thoughts, then you're a thought leader at that point, or at least on your way.
Yep. I almost want to think, like, people have talked about the 10,000 hour rule. And I'm like, it needs to be switched up to the 10,000 comment rule, right? Like the path to beginning your journey as a thought leader, you need to leave 10,000 really helpful and original comments to people that are asking for help. Not an easy task. Takes years to do, but I promise that is the path to like real thought leadership in a digital age, is helping 1,000 people first, or 10,000 people, I should say. The 10,000 comment rule.
Yeah. And you might even be able to say that as like the 10,000 person rule when you've gone and helped 10,000 people by commenting or, helping them with questions that they have. Then out of that 10,000 people, there's going to be people who were really helped and want to come back for more.
Yep.
Yeah, that's helpful. So what are some specific things that you've seen actual thought leaders that you look up to? What have you seen them do that sets them apart?
The strongest thought leaders usually have a very strong brand. And a brand is kind of like a big and kind of complex thing until you break it down into some of its core components. So strong thought leaders have a strong position. You know what category they play in. Like April Dunford is to positioning now. Like Chris Walker is the demand gen. In fact, let's use Chris Walker as he's built kind of a strong brand over time, and why he's considered by many to be a thought leader in the B2B space and the demand generation space, right? Demand generation is his position. He's built a strong brand because he has a mission. He's got a mission against the MQL, which is kind of the enemy. He's painted the marketing qualified lead as the enemy. Like the way we've been doing marketing qualified leads and lead gen is wrong. And his mission is to fix it. His why is the backstory of why he got there. oh, because I worked for some B2B companies and they were all doing it this way. And then I actually started at just doing due diligence and measuring how effective it was, and realized that we were only converting 1% or half a percent, even though we're dumping tons of money into it. So I started taking fractions of it and of taking little tests and proving that if I just do demand gen by going out in front and doing the things that are non-trackable, then I can actually really grow the sales pipeline much more efficiently, even though it's not as easy to track.
Yeah.
That's his backstory, and why he's gotten to his mission is do demand gen his way, not the lead gen way, right? And then he's kind of built out around that narrative, and he's kind of created, I think what most really good thought leaders are is they have that strong mission, and it's one, it's right, but two, it's going against an established system or a whole group of people that are going to get mad at it. That's what really sets strong thought leaders apart, is when they're doing something that's countercultural. Or what I can't remember his name. I think his name's Bob Baker. I was on a podcast with him about, he's a thought leader's thought leader. He's like, good thought leaders are bifurcating. Like, they have to force people to go in one or two directions. You're either with me or you're freaking not.
Yeah.
Right. And so Chris Walker does that. He's like, you're either in the demand gen game or you're in the lead capture game. We're going to go generate demand over here while you're trying to get our slop left over of the leads we couldn't capture, because we're out ahead of you generating demand rather than just capturing it. Right. So that's kind of his story. He's bifurcating in that. And all the lead gen HubSpot people are like, wait, no, we love generating leads. We love nurturing leads, of which I've done it successfully. So it's not like it doesn't work. It can work. I've been doing lead gen and lead nurturing and all that kind of stuff and growing businesses with it for a while.
Right.
But because he's pitting all that as unsuccessful on the way to the loser, the game, the playbook for losers, he's created tension, and that just creates virality and creates like a us versus them mentality, which good thought leaders kind of do, which is kind of sad that everything has to be bifurcating like that. Like you see that playing out across politics and all kinds of places. But honestly, that's the strongest thought leaders do have something like that. They have a mission that is a clear, like they're right, and they have a lot of people that are willing to go with them on it, but they have a lot of people that aren't fans of it either.
Yeah, and it's like almost
that's hard to find that balance, but you don't need to find that balance right away. You can discover it piece by piece, but be looking for it. I think having eyes for it is the real key. Knowing, and then throwing out ideas on social every once in a while and seeing which ones you create some stir with. Every once in a while, like kick the beehive and run and see what happens, and see if a bunch of people come to your idea and say like, yeah, this is the best. And a bunch of people come to you against your idea and say like, this is crap. This is the most horrible thing. Here's why. That might be your position that you need to take, but it depends. You have to try to test a bunch of things and see which ones work.
Yeah, I think that
and some of them might be small pieces of your thought leadership. Some of them might be your whole platform.
Yeah.
Right. Like the anti-MQL thing is Chris's whole platform. I haven't even found this for myself yet, so I'm still kind of looking for it. But strong thought leaders do this.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that you made about thought leaders causing that bifurcation. And another person that comes to mind, I mean, I'm a huge Dave Ramsey fan, so I'll talk about him more than I probably should, just because he's made a huge impact in my life personally. But I think he's one of the best examples of somebody that's done that. I mean, he has taken very hard stances that are extremely countercultural and get people riled up. You know, either people riled up because they go, are you kidding me? I take my airplane trips, my vacation every year only on points. And so Dave Ramsey's full of crap. Credit cards are the best thing ever. And then you'll have somebody will post that on one of his social posts. And then somebody else will comment back and be like, are you kidding me? I'm now a millionaire because I cut up my credit cards 20 years ago, and you get these fights breaking out in the comments. But you really do see that. And he sticks to that mission come hell or high water. I mean, he is diehard about it. And that's what makes him interesting. And it's the fact that people brush up against that does give it that kind of tension. And tension makes things interesting. And the more there's tension, the more you feel compelled to have an emotional reaction to it one way or the other. And it's also probably one of the best ways to get somebody to actually change their mind is to upset them. And then maybe they are upset for a long time, but then years down the road, they end up coming around to your point of view, and maybe sooner, but they wouldn't have if there wasn't that emotional reaction to it to begin with. So I find that to be really interesting.
Yep. Takes time to figure it out though. Brands like that do not, you can't, even experts that are expert brand builders cannot just go into a week-long meeting, 40 hours of brainstorming with you and this expert, and are going to come up with your brand plan that's going to be it. And it's going to be the same 10 years from now. Nope. It grows over time because you do not know what's going to resonate. You do not know which ideas are going to be the most helpful. You do not know which ones are going to be the most timely. So the only way you can do it is by one, starting off to pursue being an expert. If you're a professional already, and most people who listen to this will be like a professional something, right? You're an email marketer, you're a copywriter. So you already have like that thing that you're into. Read every single book on that topic, and then start a podcast and start interviewing people who are ahead of you in that topic. Trust me, you're going to start becoming an expert. Like once you've read every book, you have a confidence that you've read every book on the topic. Yeah. There's usually not on a specific niche. Like there's not more than 20 or 30 copywriting books that are worthwhile.
Right.
Right. If you've read 20 books on copywriting, you've probably read all of them. Right. Or email marketing.
Yeah.
There's probably 30 to 40 key players in any small niche industry. So if you interview them all and start reading them all, and afterwards you're gonna have some ideas about that. So you'll start growing your expertise. You'll start having some ideas. You post them on social. You test them out. Some resonate, some don't. Let the algorithms tell you which ones are winners and which ones are losers. If they're winners, develop them farther. Put some more time into it. Research it. Post it again with more back. If it wins again, then build a whole report out of it. Write a whole book on it.
Yeah.
How you start to grow your thought leadership, and you do it slowly by establishing your expertise, by podcasting and interviewing the people who are experts at that thing, and by slowly testing ideas on social and building up a following there, not as a thought leader, but as a student first. Yeah. And then it'll slowly transition to thought leader, though you never have to say it.
Strategic Marketer is brought to you in part by Thrive Themes. Thrive Themes is a killer visual WordPress editor. They've also recently launched editable themes so that you can edit every element of your WordPress theme. You can create amazing landing pages that are beautiful and conversion focused. They've built all of their products around helping you convert more leads into customers. You can find out more about Thrive Themes by clicking the link in the show notes. Yeah, and I think that's important because I'm with you on, I haven't really found my spot yet. And I have tried multiple times with different things. And I think I've had some good ideas and some fairly unique ideas in the past, but they weren't interesting enough to get other people to really get behind it. And some of that seasoning too. Maybe I'll come back to some of those ideas down the road when I'm more seasoned and I know how to communicate them better or make them more compelling. But it does just take time. And so if you're in this rush to try to get famous for whatever it is that you're doing, or get that attention, that's going to be difficult. But if you're looking at it, from a long-term perspective, I think you're more willing to take small risks if you're not as concerned about today's post on social, whether it's going to go viral or not, if you're not too concerned about that. And honestly, in some ways, I think it's a blessing when things don't go viral too soon, because you might end up getting yourself into an area you're not even that interested in. If it goes viral and you get a lot of attention, you could end up kind of being pigeonholed into an area you don't have as much interest in. Whereas if you build something over time, you can refine it as you go along, little steps at a time. But to kind of,
I think I was worried about getting pigeonholed in my career, and now I see actually, you don't have to worry about it. Like it's probably better to go deep on one thing first. I've always been a generalist. I know, Joseph, you've been a generalist. Picking one thing and then going deep on it is okay.
Yeah.
Because once you become, especially if you start like reading extensively, podcasting, writing blogs about that one thing, and everyone starts to know you for that one thing, don't worry if that thing's going to die later. Like maybe it's TikTok. You're like, yeah, but people are starting to look into China's ties to TikTok again. Like, screw that. Like, you can't predict the future. Just go all in on it. If you have to pivot later, you can pivot.
Yeah.
But take a swing. It's actually more risky to not do it, because it's so much easier to get found if you stand for something. It's positioning for yourself, and if you don't have a strong position in something, then it's harder to remember you.
Yeah,
and that's like one of the worst things in marketing ever. So pick something, go after it. Once you get established in one thing, it's easy to add another and another and another. Gary Vee, what was he known for first?
Wine library.
Wine.
Yeah.
And then he added social media. And then it was digital marketing. And now it's like full marketing. Now it's entrepreneurship. Now it's just like
who knows?
Freaking business, media,
like
attention, like everything, like garage sailing, like he does everything. But it started with one thing. Yeah. You're going to go up the ladder and go up in your notoriety and your celebrity and your thought leadership on one topic. You will never go up as a thought leader on 10 topics.
Yeah, and I
cannot think of one person who became a thought leader on 10 topics.
I want to emphasize something.
You have to start with one.
You've brought up a couple times. You said it two different ways. Bifurcating, and basically making it so that people have to choose to either love you or hate you. In a sense, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be quite that extreme. But the people who really succeed, there's people who love them and people who hate them, including Gary Vee. He's an example of somebody that's been very controversial. He's much more mainstream now, but back in the day when he wrote Crush It and all of those books, Jab, 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 Right Hook, those were pretty interesting ideas. And there were other people who were talking about it, but he certainly took a stand in a more mainstream way and got attention for it. And there were people who hated him for it. But then, the bifurcating and taking a stand. And I think that's probably something that personally I've been really weak on, because I tend to be a people pleaser by just kind of my nature. And so taking a stand on something is scary, but I do think that that's a really important thing to take away when you're thinking about thought leadership. And I think you shouldn't necessarily do that trivially. The point isn't to be controversial for the sake of being controversial, but it's to believe in something enough to be willing to take a stand on it. And when you have something that you believe enough to take a stand for, that's when you can really start moving into being respected by people. I mean, people respect you even if they hate you. They respect you when you stand for something versus making everybody happy.
That's it. You got to stand for something. You got to be there.
Yeah. So to just kind of put a bow on this, one thing I want to leave people with every time I have a guest on is just practical steps that they can take. So if somebody wants to be a thought leader, I know you've thought through this pretty extensively before. So if you can, I know you've kind of buzzed through a few of the things throughout, but can you tell me a little bit about the practical steps with the 30-30-30 plan and how people can start moving in the direction of becoming a thought leader?
That's right. And I've dropped some of this already, but essentially I wanted to study this topic of thought leadership. And after reading all the books on the material and interviewing all the people, I realized I was well on my path to becoming known about this topic. And I'm like, well, that anybody can do this. So I just called it the 30-30-30 plan. And now I'm helping other people walk through it as well. It's essentially 30 books, 30 podcast episodes, 30 blog posts. Pick a niche that has no more than 30 books on it. If it has more than 30 books on it, then it's too big. Go down farther, niche down farther. And it's okay if it only has like 15 books in it, like account-based marketing only has 15 books. Fine, pick it, read all the books on the topic. Then start a podcast on that topic. Interview the 30 leaders in that space or practitioners, people who are doing it actively. Ask them good questions. Interview some of the authors of the books you've read. Ask them great questions. Of course, you're posting to social media the whole time. So even as you're reading the books, you're posting things you learned. Oh, what I learned from reading the top 5 books, what I learned from reading every book on this topic. You're posting stuff like that. Hey, best quote I've read on ABM from all the books out there. If ABM's the thing. And then you go and talk to the people and you go back and forth on some of the things that you thought were cool and some of the things you thought weren't cool. You kind of like, you get into it and go deeper with them. You're not only learning and honing your expertise, but in the whole time you're growing in your authority on these things. Yeah. Because the people who are the actual experts and thought leaders on the space are starting to get to know who you are. And you're starting to share with everybody else that you're having conversations with these people. People are starting to associate you with this topic because you're talking to all the people in the space. You're posting about all the books in the space. And then if you go and look up the 30 most searched terms on Google for the 30 blog posts, and you just do it SEO wise, like you go and find like, what is ABM? What are examples of ABM? Examples of B2B or ABM in the medical field. It's like you go and find those keywords and then write 30 blog posts that are the best answers on the internet for those. You're going to start becoming known on search as people look up answers. It's your face coming up on those articles, right? And you're being helpful. Those are little pieces. You can even share each blog post on social. Again, just kind of starting as a student and sharing, posting your learnings along the way. All of a sudden, they're going to know who you are. So that's the 30-30-30 plan. Also pair that with a concept I call learning in the light. Don't pretend to be the one who knows it all. Position yourself as a student. Just say like, hey, I'm trying to learn this. I'm trying to learn everything there is about it. Join me on my journey. I just talked to so-and-so. I just read this book. This is what I'm learning now. Hey, I actually tried one of those things and it didn't work. Here's the change I made to make it work. And all of a sudden, as you're posting things that have been helpful to you, the people behind you will start to be helped more and more. And you'll start to become a thought leader. You'll start to build authority. You'll start to come up with original ideas because you've seen all the things that are out there and what problems are still left and are unanswered. You'll start rubbing shoulders with the people who are in the know. And slowly you'll start to see your authority build over time. As you grow in your expertise, you start to contribute original and helpful ideas, and you'll start to actually just become a thought leader.
Okay, so we have 30 books, and the second one was
30 books, 30 episodes, 30 blog posts. It's a lot. It's not easy, but spread it over 3 years, and all of a sudden it's not that big.
Yeah.
10 books a year, 10 episodes a year, 10 blog posts over a year. Are you kidding? Yeah. Isn't this your full-time job already anyway? Aren't you a professional in the space? You probably have something to say already. You just need to brush up on the books you haven't read. Maybe you've already written blog posts about that. Great. Go write some more on the 30 top most searched things. And then go and kick up a free podcast on Anchor or Sounder and go and start asking people for interviews. More people will say yes than you think.
Awesome. Oh, I love that. And I'm going to ask you to take it one more step practical, because I love that. Is extremely practical for people in the long run. So if somebody's just like, okay, I haven't done anything in this area at all, and I have read a decent amount, maybe they've read 5 or 10 books in the area, and they've written a couple blog posts. What would you encourage somebody to do to start stepping out to start getting the attention now, like start getting people to see what they're talking about? How do they get their thoughts out there? What's the first step that they could take if they haven't done anything?
Posting things that are helpful to those who are behind you or haven't learned what you learned on social, and posting it regularly. And then, like we mentioned earlier in this episode, you just can't post and flaunt your wisdom, right? You want to go and bring it to the comments of the people that are also posting. So go to your LinkedIn feed and comment on every single post that's rolling through there is the most helpful and genuine post you can, not just copy and paste. Great job, great post, emoji, great job, great post. That's going to go nowhere. Leave genuine comments on every single one. And people will start to become familiar with you. And your post that you are posting will get more traction as people interact with you in the comments. You'll start to notice the algorithm favors you. I actually spend about 30 minutes commenting before I post. And then I spend more time commenting all day. I kind of like prime the pump every single morning when I wake up. I just hop on, I start commenting, and then I write my post. Or if I don't already have it written for that day already, and then I post it, and then I continue commenting more. So that's the rhythm.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks, Dan. My main takeaway from this is that I'm going to put thought leader in my my head, my tagline for LinkedIn.
Don't do it.
Just kidding.
Never.
Don't do that. Take a stand and start going and becoming an expert by reading, interviewing, and blogging. It's really, really helpful. I think it's super practical advice for people that want to start moving that way. So thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to The Strategic Marketer wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could do me a personal favor and hit 5 stars on the rating, you don't have to leave a full review. Just hit 5 stars. It would really help me out. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Strategic Marketer.